Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hustle AI podcast. We are your hosts, Jitin and Sunaina. Before we get started, a quick introduction about us. I am Jitin. I'm the CEO and co-founder at MicroGigs. At MicroGigs, we use AI to help you build software products better, faster, and for less. So what we do is that leveraging AI, we automate different stages of software development process, which allows you to focus less on the development overheads and more on your ideas, and indirectly saving you time and money. In general, like my background has been in tech. I played different roles from software developer to different tech leadership roles. And I have with me a friend of mine, Sunaina. So, Sunaina, why don't you give us a quick background about yourself before we get started?
Awesome. Thanks, Jitin. Hi, everyone. My name is Sunaina. I'm a tech enthusiast and I have a background in product management. I'm really interested in learning about how AI can help us live happier lives. And I also love exploring different ideas and meeting with different people with different backgrounds and looking forward to exploring that in this podcast.
So this is our episode 2, and today we have a special guest, Sahand. Sahand has been a close friend of mine. We have worked together a lot in the past. Sahand has extensive experience working with startups, helping build few startups out there, working with corporate banking and few other industries. So I will let Sahand introduce himself a little bit, what his latest ventures are and what he's doing now, and then we'll get started with an interesting conversation. Sahand.
Awesome. Thanks, Jitin. Thanks, Sunaina, for having me on the show. It's an honor. It's my first podcast as a guest. So thanks, and it's great to be here. My name is Sahand Sojoodi. I am the founder and managing director of Integral Software. We build custom software for businesses to make their businesses run more profitably and grow faster. So we do a lot of work with manufacturers, financial institutions, and startups as well, helping them with software.
Awesome.
Right. Amongst other things.
All right. Okay. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Okay. Yeah. So, Sam, what we do here is just talk about the latest trends of AI. So the reason why we started this is Sunain and I, we have been talking about few things on AI. We at MicroGigs, especially, I've been trying out how we could leverage the recent breakthroughs with OpenAI and some of the new tech which has been made available, how we could fast track some of the software development process. So since we have been talking, we have been having few conversations, we thought maybe we could open up this conversation to a larger forum, and we could start having this conversation with much more smarter people like you.
So you got the wrong guy here.
No, you are. So that we could learn the process, maybe in our conversations and discussions, we discover some nuggets, and maybe for a selfish reason, if there is some cool idea, I might just run with it, so.
Do it. I'm giving you a disclaimer to use any ideas that we come up with here today on air.
Awesome. Anyways, yeah. So, so that's been what we have been trying to do over here. So on on that topic, a lot of things have been happening in the AI. I guess the last 2 to 3 months, everyone has been busy talking about it. Now, at least I expect this should be something new, trend setting. A lot of industries are gonna change. It's gonna impact even every day. A lot of professional white collar jobs to even how SaaS companies operate and so on. Mm-hmm. Or maybe some people still believe this might be the Web3 or the crypto wave, right? Which will die out in next few months. We don't know, right? But I'm still on the the positive side of this.
Yeah.
I would like to get your thoughts on this. What do you feel? And where do you see this space
100%.
going?
So it's funny you mentioned Web3. I don't want to be crucified by saying this, but I feel the same way, right? Blockchain is just such an elegant piece of technology. The original white paper that came out in 2009, or was it 9, I think. Just awesome tech. And it'll keep growing, but because I know for 10 years, no, more than 10 years now, I've been asking, so what's the use case? And a lot of times the use case around it ends up kind of being something like, why can't we just use a database or whatever, right? So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of crypto or Web3 here, but when ChatGPT came out in November of 2022. When I used it, it felt the same way as when the Apple App Store opened up their what do you call it? Third-party app API in 2008. I lived through that. We were part of I'd been part of the founding team of Extreme Labs, which was a software development company, but we saw the App Store be released, and then you just could see the writing on the wall. So I do remember that summer we were up on the rooftop of the office we had in downtown Toronto. It was a great office. We were like, this is a tsunami. It's just gonna open up such a new way of doing business, new way of transferring of information. What can we do? And we started building some cool apps around it, and the rest is history. That company did really well. Wrote that mobile wave, mobile social local, whatever, the acronym. That one, right? So I see the same thing with ChatGPT, and I know AI is not new. And I know ChatGPT has its shortcomings, all that stuff, but it really, gives you an accelerator. As a professional, we're mostly in the B2B business. What we do is like create workflow software or just like help business problems, right? So not an expert in consumer facing products or tech, but it really, as a professional, whether it's part of your job or whether it's part of your business offering, it helps you. Doesn't replace you, but it helps you. And that's what I saw in November. And I was like, this is freaking crazy. It's amazing. I remember sending the link to one of my clients in the software development business. And later on that day, he said, this is awesome. This probably saved me like a few days of development work. And I said, did I just, what did I do here? Yeah. But I truly believe in, and I still do that, if you were paying for 2 days of that low level of programming that you could save, great. Do that via ChatGPT. Bring to us your more complicated problems to solve, right? So anyway, a big believer in it. And the one thing that has always been big for me is not AI as a replacement for what we do in white collar jobs. It's the same thing that, in a sense, it's the same thing that robotic does in blue-collar jobs, some of them. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll get rid of the jobs. Yes, some jobs will be eliminated in favor of you being able to either manage a larger force, or it just augments humans' capabilities, in my opinion. So I'm a big believer in human augmenting AI, if you will, right?
Yeah.
I have lots of examples from a long time ago too, but that's
interesting. Okay, we will get there. We'll get there. Yeah. I really love this analogy of AI coming onto the scenes, like Apple opening up their their libraries to third-party developers, right?
Yeah.
Of course, I was still in university, but remember that was still a big movement, and I believe that moment in history, right? You could say, okay, was the inflection point of so many billion-dollar industries, businesses all popping up on the scenes, right? Today, most of the apps we use, Airbnb, Uber, and all, wouldn't have been possible just without that concept.
That's right. Yeah.
So, on that note, of course, we are maybe at forefront of some avalanche which is about to break loose. So what do you see, in terms of new businesses, industries, or all those things popping up on the scenes?
Oh gosh, it's like asking me in 2009 what, how can I forecast WeWork, right? As we sit in one. I think there is a ton of repetitive work that we do in a variety of roles, especially in the knowledge economy, knowledge settings. Content generation, content consolidation, lots of different use cases, right? What I've seen do pretty interesting things is using generative AI, because, by the way, we're talking about generative AI, right? Because classifiers, everything else, like recommenders, that's how Amazon makes so much money by telling us what else to see and buy. Or what's feeding my Instagram addiction, but that's another story for another day. But from a generative AI perspective, content, blog posts, LinkedIn shares, well, just sort of I'm involved in a podcast in which we used ChatGPT to come up with the tagline for that podcast for us. So for hustle.ai, you should look into leveraging AI to do some of this stuff, right? But that's the that's the kind of stuff that I see the initial avalanche of cool use cases, and then honestly, I've used it to give me ideas to unblock me. I've used ChatGPT as a I guess co-pilot, even though that's another generative AI product, but as a wingman or a co-pilot to just kind of go back and forth, right? Because a lot of times I find for my brain, especially, some people have better working brains, but mine, I need a catalyst. Having a conversation is when I start thinking. So, doing that with the Chat GPT is great. So that's some of the things that I've seen personally. Tons of stuff, like communication emails. You get so many repetitive sounding blah emails from any business you might be dealing with, right? And it's perfectly fine because they're supposed to be informative. Let's just take delivery emails, right? On Amazon, you get an email saying order so-and-so has been shipped. Okay, great. Now, again, that's great. I'm not saying use ChatGPT to do something else because that's what the purpose of the email is. But imagine that you kind of added a softer, more human touch, funny enough, via AI to the email, and do it at scale. If you were to pay somebody to write a tagline, I don't know. And it's not a high value, potentially bit of product, but there's just so many things that are possible now.
True. I mean, the one example that I could think of is even as we were putting together a few stuff for our business, especially understanding the laws in different parts of the world, right? GDPR and all. So with chat, if this was not the case, I may have to talk to few people and decide okay, how do I get the content and how do I control which information should be made available to whom. But with this, I was able to kind of short circuit that whole process. So I agree.
100%. But I still suggest that you engage a lawyer to make sure everything's all professional and okay.
That's actually point taken. Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I suggest you talk to one.
That's until it's trained on enough material.
And interesting you should say that. There's a big, I think, Toronto-based, definitely Canadian, I forget the name now, AI powered company out of Toronto that does a lot of legal work. So there's a ton of AI in the legal world is fairly old compared to ChatGPT, fairly old. A few years ago, and started with Watson, I think IBM's Watson, to use IBM's Watson to analyze the text. I don't think it's generative. Maybe by now it is, but it's really classifying and doing a lot of the research work using AI. So definitely the legal field is primed for that.
Interesting.
Well, so legal is a beautiful place to talk about because the field of legal is where we as humans have codified or turned our emotional, irrational, sometimes more often irrational. We've turned our ways of being human into a codified, more like a computer program, if you will, right? Not quite, but still. So it's of course going to be primed for AI for whether it's rules-based or anyways, for structured thinkers to do a better job at it than we do as humans, right? So that's an interesting field to look at.
Interesting, very interesting.
You don't want generative AI in the accounting field, for example. You don't know how many things will be invented by it, right? I'm kidding. I'm sure there's use cases there.
Agree.
I can just imagine two ChatGPTs arguing out their points of view.
That's what.
Whose
that's
system is better?
I think that's I'm not an AI expert from even from an application perspective, but I think that's actually a really great way that adversarial generative AI works, right? So there's two different agents that go against each other until it perfects something and comes out of it. You might know more about it than I do, but
like I mean, like not much like on that field, but yeah, like kind of like we have an idea like how those things work. But yeah, anyways, I mean, all right. So you had an interesting question, right? Like,
yeah. So I mean, I just wanted to point out you said that AI has helped unblock you. That's such an interesting use case that I haven't heard of before, because usually people think of it as something like we have to compete against ChatGPT. It's always like, okay, we're always trying to keep up in this race. So what can we do better than ChatGPT? But I like this use case because it's an ally in helping to discover human potential. And it's constantly learning from you as well. So like every time you have a conversation, it's learning, you're learning, and it feels like if intelligence was entropy, it's always, I don't know if that makes sense, but like
no, I'm a big believer in that. Of course, it can be abused like any other technology, right? So, for example, robotics or like lift trucks, right? Of course, it replaces humans who used to do that. But is that a good thing? Yes, because then the human can operate that machine. And, there's different variations and more evolution of how autonomous these things are. So, I think of it as a potential, definitely an ally so far. I mean, who knows, maybe in a few years we'll reevaluate and then go, rally behind John Connor and see if, he can get rid of the Terminators for us. But joking aside, 100%. All of a sudden, just like if you had a mechanical drill, I have used one of those, versus an electric powered one. So yes, it helps with now with mental work, right? Like give me, like I've said ChatGPT, give me 5 examples of how scheduling software can be used in manufacturing. Literally, I've asked that, and blog post is to come. But those are some of the ways that it's helped unblock. But I would never, and this is one interesting aspect to think about, which is I wouldn't just copy paste whatever comes of ChatGPT into a blog post or an email. But there is definitely concern that, there are people who may end up starting to do that. And then what's the implication of that, right? With ChatGPT, I know of numerous companies who've had to ban it. And at first I was like, that's backwards. And then you think about it for a second and I realized, these companies are in possession of highly sensitive, highly confidential. Sometimes it's related to the financial market. Sometimes it's related to defense. And so, of course, it doesn't make sense to do that. Now, if that's divulging of confidential information, but if they had an internal ChatGPT, so here's an idea for you, go build it, within an organization, then, maybe it'll alleviate some of that. But still, like, just blindly using the tool is not obviously something I would suggest, but definitely as a tool, as a way of helping accelerate your process or your thinking or your output, 100%, always.
That's a very interesting point. And I guess to the point that you mentioned, companies could have their own internal chat GPT. I'm pretty sure there are a few startups already working on it.
Right.
And I believe if someone could really build this, a lot of companies would be much more efficient, because so many companies have tracked so much information of the period of last, 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
Right.
And most of the big corporate companies, they don't have good documentation process or good structure. It's it's not something that humans would be able to like figure it out. But with ChatGPT, some tool like some LLM model which would just digest all that content and just make it available. Hey, what are you looking for? I'm looking to build this, or this is how it was built on this date, and these were the outputs, and these were the stories addressed like it building this, and this is the URL, right? Look at this, see if this is helpful. If something is missing, I could connect you to someone who knows about this. Just imagine this, right? Because when my personal experience working in like corporate world, I have to build something, I need someone's help. I only know one person's name. I ask this person, I haven't touched this, like you should talk to someone else. I reach out to that person. It goes round and round and round circles, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I believe this is something that will really cut short that journey. And so it's a very interesting thing.
Although as software professionals, it's a nirvana that you would basically think that maybe it'll eliminate the need for custom software or our work, but just like take search.
Yeah.
Right. Google's amazing.
Yeah.
Like they've solved the search problem has been solved. There are some search products within organizations, enterprise search, but I don't believe it's still a well-solved problem within enterprise, right?
No.
Even though, and the complexity, we've all worked on it before together, right? Who can see what? Who can has that?
Exactly.
All these different levels of access, and so imagine that you had a trusted machine that had no emotion or intelligence. Well, that's an oxymoron. Okay, has some intelligence, and let's just say that machine could be trusted to get trained on everything. But what if you can't guarantee that the output generated for Jitin is not influenced by that piece of content that he wasn't supposed to know? You know what I mean? So there's still going to be a lot of really interesting layers that will for years give us jobs of now, search is well solved now, or, deal with your AI problems. So it's a good time to be in software.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And especially on this point, I believe, to be honest, like ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever they are doing or whatever Google is going to do with their system called Bard or something, it's still in its very nascent stages.
That's right.
Like even though we look at data, I don't trust this data. But imagine 3 years down the line, it gets smart enough to present you the correct data. Of course, there would be organizational layers, like say from Microsoft would be controlling, if this information has to be accurate, otherwise people might be suing them. Right. So there might be more incentives for them to make sure they're presenting the correct data. And even when it comes to companies, maybe these LLM models, they might be able to figure out, let's say I don't have I shouldn't have access to so and so data or so and so data tier, but can I at least give some context to this person so that this person could go ahead and build it? Or even maybe a next step, let me ChatGPT or some tool telling me, hey, this person, you need to get permission from this person. If you're okay, may I ask this person? This tool could go and check the person. Hey, Jitin needs access to so and so information to build this. This is the context. So that will save me from not typing out this big email and copying some 10, 15 people on this. So, it will ask, okay, approved, done. I could start building it. Just imagine, right? The breakthroughs.
No, 100%. And you can think of it as, there's always some people in the organization who are either really great at navigating it or indexing things, or they've just been there for a long time that have that context and knowledge, right? So imagine that ChatGPT replaces that skill.
Yeah.
That if Jitin wants to know more about generative AI, the AI would know that Sunaina is the expert based on some trail of project activities, emails, all that stuff. So the tool can suggest you to connect with Sunaina, but it wouldn't tell you what is in Sunaina's head. Then you can identify whether Jitin is supposed to know this or not, and then relay the Anyway, so that's an interesting one.
So it's like we're training ChatGPT. So it's like each person is training a ChatGPT to mirror their own brain, so that will become essentially. Eventually, if ChatGPT is sufficiently trained on each of us, then for organizations, it just means now we're a bunch of interacting robots. That's all.
But aren't we all
Yeah,
anyway?
I mean, the best thing I could think about this is imagine like how many meetings I would get to skip.
I know.
Because most of the meetings,
But would you have a job though?
we'll see. Like we'll figure out something else, right? But like
Yeah.
yeah, we'll figure out something else. But at least like like what are we having this meeting for? Just
Yeah.
discussing this 2 or 3 points. Maybe
Right.
5-minute thing, but it's preceded by the 5 minute of introductions and
Right.
like then you followed up with like another 10 minutes of what are the next steps and maybe what are you think, what is this thing, because there are 10 people in the room, you have to make everyone happy to some extent, so it leads to all this conversation, right? But this is like, okay, this is Jitin's brain, go and ask whatever you need to know, and like I'm like, okay.
Oh yeah, Jitin's brain can learn from another person, fill you in later on, and tell you, oh, this is what you're missed. I can attend 10 meetings at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
things.
yeah, I think if you limit the scope of it, it actually could be really useful and not that difficult or not too far away from reaching that place. For example, Calendly. Have you guys used Calendly, right?
Yeah.
So that's a way for you to outsource not your brain, I guess, but your calendar so that you can actually engage in 10 different appointment setting conversations, if you will, via one user interface, right? I remember X.AI was the chat version of this that was supposed to like go back and forth and figure out the timing that works. I think that was one of the first like cool AI chatbots.
I've seen that. There's also been
17 or 15 or something.
Yeah, there is also, I forgot the name, like some chatbot called Amy or something. You just CC it and it will figure out what is your perfect time and like
that was X.AI.
something.
Yeah, anyway,
there were a few tools. I would actually want to circle back on one of the topics that you folks were discussing a while back, and this was goes back to what you said, as in like how ChatGPT has been, like you have been using it as a co-pilot or a buddy to kind of like do more efficient work, right? Or you could like bounce off ideas or learn new things in that process. And I believe that is something like very interesting in the sense that today, almost, especially most of the white collar jobs, they're all work from home, right? People are working at their own residence. So the way it used to happen 3-4 years back, people are sitting in offices, I'm working, and I'd be like, hey, you know what, son, I had this idea, like, just bouncing off, like, the way we used to bounce off ideas, come up with some new discoveries and working on that. That doesn't happen much, right? So I'm just in my style of working. If someone books a meeting, something happens, right? But now, like, I mean, the work from home is not going to go anywhere. People are used to it. Companies have seen its efficiencies. Some companies may want to justify why they have this office building, and also they might have this once a week, twice a week, whatever, but still at least 60% of your working hours would be, working from home or something. And in this scenario, if there is an efficient tool, I mean, ChatGPT could do that to some extent, but here in this something, okay, I'm working on this, like, very good bounce of ideas. This is my buddy sitting next to me, like, like, I just want to kind of like get your thoughts, and even like yours as well, like, how do you feel this explosion of productivity will happen? Because that's been one of the biggest complaints, right? Like, work from home, like, you are not discovering ideas, but
right. You're painting a pretty sad picture if ChatGPT becomes my buddy, but I know what you mean. So how do I feel about this? So remote, same with remote, right? Remote was great for productivity, not great for creativity, right? Maybe ChatGPT has evolved us a little bit. Maybe it's not there because I have used it to then do some more complex tasks and thinking, and it just it's not there. So it's fairly superficial. So it's good as an unblocker, as maybe a co-pilot, but I wouldn't yet, at least, think of it as a replacement for, even from a computational, and humans are more than just computation, but let's say computational creativity, and structured thinking. I wouldn't rely, I don't think ChatGPT is there yet, but I also won't rule it out that maybe within a year, maybe within 2 years, maybe within 5 years we'll be there. But in terms of what it can't do and how I think remote may not be as long-standing a trend as we think it is that there's so many aspects of our human psyche and being a human that it needs that personal connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard of, and I wouldn't be surprised, I'd heard about it through the context of business and banking. I've heard about it through the context of even in software organizations, that there's a big trend for especially younger, maybe right out of school,
Mm-hmm.
folks who are actually attracted to office-based jobs more than remote, just because you don't have a network, you don't have human connections. Now, places like, let's say, WeWork provide a little bit of that, right? So you can work for different companies, and WeWork becomes your community, your human touch, maybe. But anyway, I'm digressing a bit. But coming back to what you were saying, I think it's great for ChatGPT at this point. Is great as a junior collaborator, maybe let's say, or somebody. Okay. No, something.
Something,
something.
Not like the, what is that thing in Iron Man Jarvis? So like something talking about.
Yeah, an entity that you that you can use as the same way that you'd go on Google to search for stuff, or Bing, or DuckDuckGo, whatever search engine you use to get information. But this is a bit more directed. Because of, I think, the language model, maybe it's just a better UI than typing something in Google.
Makes sense, yeah.
But I wouldn't. I don't think it's there to replace even highly complex situations yet.
100%.
Look, I've used ChatGPT to generate code, and sometimes I've been like, "Oh, this is amazing." Never has it been fully correct. Unless you just tell it to write, a hello world program in C, then it'll be correct, or Python or whatever. Yeah. But the minute you just give it a bit of complexity, yes, it does. But it provides a lot of great insights based on its training. But anyway, I wouldn't call ChatGPT something that you can actually have highly intelligent conversations with.
Okay. All right.
You can be inspired.
Yeah,
but not buy it. Definitely buy it. It's a great piece of technology, but it could give you ideas, but I don't think it provides expertise.
100%.
Right? Like if I'm even with content generation, I would rely on it because I'm such an unexpert in such a novice in some topics, that a Google search result or a ChatGPT answer would be expertise to me, and sometimes that's enough. But in my line of work, in where I have expertise,
makes sense. Yeah,
it's not there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now, what do you think about this same topic?
So I don't. So first of all, the human element, I don't think in its current form I could interact with it like a human. But what I do view it as is a way to, I guess, externalize part of my own brain into it and say that this is the thought that I'm having now. And the moment it's in ChatGPT, it can now take that and then use the power of the internet to show me multiple ways I can think about that. And it's like having a conversation with different parts of myself that have different identities. And I find that really useful to think through things myself. So it may not be, like, maybe it doesn't take the persona of another human, but I do feel, I feel empathy towards it. Like, I like it because it's like, oh, you know what? It feels like a different part of me that's just talking back to me, but from this, external source of information. So, and it's only been, and with regards to your point about the complexity, I feel like if it's done this much in these many months, who really knows what it's going to be? I mean, there's already like the guy at Google or Microsoft who said it's sentient and then didn't want to, like, there's already people that feel like that. And I don't know, once it starts to talk like that, I started using this app before ChatGPT. It was called Bobot. And it was not anywhere close to the sophistication that ChatGPT has, but it had a very nice way of talking, less clinical. ChatGPT is like, well, I'm a large language AI model. I suggest you talk to someone else. This wasn't like that. It was very friendly, and it had all of my data, so it was able to talk to me in the way that I wanted to. And even though intellectually I knew that this is a machine, I was able to get that feeling of not kinship, but I don't know. I
Interesting.
felt chemically, I'm sure my body somewhat thought that I was talking to another human.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one thing.
Like that is, I mean, okay, like now, like to get a little bit philosophical, right? I mean, if you look at what is a human, right? When a human baby is born, like baby doesn't know anything, but baby learns, processes, picks up things on that, right? Now, if let's say the baby was supposed to born, I don't know, somewhere far away in a forest or an island without any human contact, that person won't have any of this knowledge or information.
Right.
But you put that person maybe say in the Western world or any of this or modern world, that person picks up all this information, could answer questions and so on. Now, when you think about it, if you could separate that human, like one is the emotional part, like which makes a human, the flesh and blood, and then the intellect part, which makes them function in a society. If you could think of a human on that note, and like here we have this new tool popping up, which is devoid of all this flesh and emotions and all, which is just having the intellect part. Now, are you able to connect with that intellect part? That's maybe, right? I mean, one of the reasons why we are sitting here and talking is we are able to connect on some intellect part, right? I mean, like, meaning the friends and we could like share a beer or drink or something. But there is also this thing which allows us to have a conversation. Now, are we able to have this conversation? I mean, I know it's a really it's a scary like prospect, like not, I mean, something that we used to see in the sci-fi movies or, 10 years back, you were like, oh, this is maybe 100, 200, 1,000 years.
It's a lot closer,
Now it's like, we are seeing, like something is going to happen, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's no different. Like, I mean, when we talk to each other, I mean, it all comes down to the assumption of consciousness, like that we are alive, right? But technically, nobody really knows. Like, you can be a machine and have.
That's true.
You don't really know. But if we can ever get past the psychological block that you have to look like this,
right,
to be alive, then maybe we could have that kind of relationship.
Working remotely with video off, anything goes, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It could be a robot typing things.
100%, exactly.
Yeah, then we live forever. Because something is trained on our brains. I mean, we technically.
We are just, I mean, anyways, I mean, like,
great downloads.
Now I'm going to shift gears from this scary topic to something else. No, like, Sandy, you have been working in, like, software industry for like 15 plus years, right? Or
2004, so it's almost 20 years.
20 years,
Crazy.
okay, cool.
And I had co-op too, so it's exactly 20 years.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So,
holy. That's a long time.
Cool. So, like one thing that, like, I mean, let's say, our job as, let's say, software professionals, like, we have been like play different roles, right? From a developer to project manager, coordinator, help build teams and help build new products and startups, and even been a developer on projects on day zero and to like being part of like 500, 1,000 people teams as well, right? At some point of time. Now, the thing is, like, one of the things that we observe is, especially in, let's say software grows, people grows, right? There are a lot of like complications that gets introduced, right? So most of those problems that big companies are solving, they're not exactly say product problems. They're more like, people problems, right? As in introducing efficiency, or how could we do this much faster? And to give an example, let's say startups with a 2 or 3 people team, they are able to move at much faster velocity. Like they agree on ideas faster. Like, that, let's say if you want to build a login page or something, or even a social media product, something very high level, you could do a part of it maybe in 1 to 2 weeks. But ask some corporate company to do it, they might take 2 months, 3 months. We need this people, that people, and all that stuff. Right. So do you see a situation how, let's say, tools like like any of the AI tools, how we could like short circuit this process? Like remove the clutter or the inefficiencies that plague all these big industries. How it would make everyone's lives easier, right? I'm a developer. I don't have to talk jump into 10 different meetings. I could directly build onto the stuff. Or someone is a project manager, I don't know whether you need project managers, but assuming with project manager is chasing developer, hey, what are your updates? And then trying to figure out what should I just convince this product owner of this, why we are delayed on this, or what are the reasons.
Right.
Just if you could talk about this a little bit.
Sure. So first of all, a big organization that pumps out a login screen in 2 to 3 months is actually pretty fast moving. Trust me. Yeah. There is more slow stories. Let's just put it that way. But no, I'm kidding. There's different range and different reasons. But yes and no. So the yes part, do these new tools help? Yes, in the sense that if they're open, and many organizations are a lot more open now than, let's say, 10 years ago regarding cloud and Google Sheets and stuff. But just like Google Sheets, right? Like all of a sudden you have the ability for 3-4 people to work in the same sheet and see the same thinking and iterations, and it accelerates your thinking. Same, I would imagine, with a lot of the AI products. I came across one, I think last night or 2 nights ago on Twitter. I was just kind of circling through things, and I saw UIZard, right? It just generates UI for you, which I want to try out. I just don't know if it exports to Figma or not. But anyway, so I can see that helping in the sense that a lot of things we do in our business software, we're especially front end and applications. Now there's back end too, but we're visual people. Everything we're building is visual. So imagine that some co-pilot or a helper could just like kind of create a bunch of concepts so everybody gets deblocked and moves faster. So that, I think that would be very helpful. The flip side of it, which is the no part, is that a lot of times the slowness, the lethargia comes from just structural challenges with a variety of reasons. And that technology, if it doesn't make it worse, it doesn't make it better. Because, for example, you have Excel, like, amazing, very flexible tool. But imagine all the different variations of Excel sheets that, circles around in all sorts of departments. So then managing those Excel sheets becomes somebody's job. And then managing, then you'll have departments that manage these Excel sheets. So yes and no. You could use it for efficiency, and you can abuse it to just add complexity to something that could have been done faster or more efficiently.
Interesting. Here's one scenario. I don't know if this will work. I mean, for example, let's say one of my experiences was in big companies. Let's say people just debating ideas, right? Like which is the best way to build something, right? A versus B versus C, right? Different people having different ideas. I talked to this client. This person wants it this way. Someone saying this is complex. We are going to spend 3 months building this, and so on. But what I see, I mean, one of the future scenarios is, imagine these meetings happening. There might be one, I'm using this word, I don't know if this would be a term, but say prompt engineer, right? Someone who's expert at using prompts and building what he wants, right? Person A says, you're saying, I think this is how it should be. This is how the screen looks. This is what you want. Other person says, I have this idea. I think this is how it should be done. This is what you want. Right. So usually things where you're debating which one could be built, should be built, or rather, I mean, most of the discussions are around, should we invest 2 months of this time in building something because we're investing 2 months, should be A versus B, right? That's what all these debates are about, right? But here, within just, let's say, with tools like AI Zard, or there's another one, Galileo or A.ai or something, same thing, right? You could generate Figma models and all. So let's say on that spot itself, within 5 minutes, you have these two screens. Both of them, you and let's say, other person could look at it. Hey, okay, this is this. This makes more sense to me. I'm gonna we are gonna run with this, right? So you get to sidestep this huge process, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's the good part of it, right? Now imagine the same scenario, but some full of himself kind of a guy like Sahand shows up and says, oh, this is cool. These 2 that you guys have discussed so far are great, but let's try another 10 of these. It comes for free. So you end up with, so that's why I'm saying that it's a great tool, or it could be used for great productivity, good, all that, and it could be abused for evil too. And I'm not talking about real evil, but wasteful efforts. And now that it's easier, let's go, we do in dysfunctional organizations or decision making or whatever, you can abuse the tech, right?
Makes sense.
Tech won't solve that problem as much. It could, but it has to be paired with great organizational thinking.
Makes sense. I agree.
the operators of that tool, because otherwise it's like a car. You can drive it, and you can also crash into things.
Yeah. That's actually a very good point.
Just at a higher volume,
Yeah.
at a higher speed, you can crash it, right?
True. That is actually a very good point. Like, I mean, the way you put it, yes, it could solve a problem, but someone because you could do this in like 2 minutes, like you need 10 more of this. So, like, why don't you take your time and just to fill up the volume of empty work, right? That's what.
Yeah, and a lot of times in the settings that I've been a part of, the greatest detriment to progress has been perfection. So now imagine if you have tools at your disposal that allows you to become even more perceived perfection, right? So if you can spend just another 2 days or 3 days or 5 days on letting the models run some more concepts through, there is a point of diminishing returns. Now, you know what I mean? Like I'm a big fan of progress in increments, MVP, we talked about it, ship and iterate, all of those could benefit from AI for sure. It could also be, it just needs to be, it's a great tool, hopefully to be used properly and not abused.
I mean, I want to draw an analogy here. I mean, maybe Sahand, you could speak to this. I mean, say one of the biggest impetus to software development happened was the availability of public cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, and all, right? I mean, earlier, if you remember in the olden days, like setting up a cloud was how do you set up a server? You need a dedicated team who could like make sure your websites are running 24/7 and all that stuff, right? But with AWS and all, I don't even have to worry, right? I mean, if now there is cloudless and serverless and like all that concepts out there. Now, this definitely did help to speed up software development. I'm not spinning cycles and so on. So taking the same analogy, what is your observation when these big corporate companies, they started using public cloud service? Did you see waste or did you see efficiencies step in?
So again, both.
Okay.
Right?
I've seen
both. Same story. Because public cloud is amazing and it has allowed for a lot of progress, big time. And then you're seeing the flip side of it now that one of my people that I look up to, he's DHH, David Hensheimer or something. Anyway, the creator of Ruby on Rails. The co-founder at CTO at Basecamp. So he made a big post a few months ago. I think maybe it was almost even a year ago about how they're going away from the cloud. And it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody to go away from the cloud and actually read his posts. They're awesome. Their blog posts and podcasts too. But what I'm trying to say is that the cloud strategy could also be abused. And the abuse is not typically is probably not going to come out of, like nobody's going to acknowledge the abuse in the DevOps team for sure. And even the software engineering team, but the CFO team is going to come back and tell you, what am I spending millions of dollars on, right? So it could be both, right?
I see.
Speaking of DevOps itself, amazing tools in DevOps, lots of progress, lots of really cool stuff that's come out. And it really, again, depends on the situation. Like if you are a bank and you have thousands of workloads or workflows that you have to invest in DevOps, a really amazing DevOps infrastructure, totally makes sense. For some of our clients, it would impose so much overhead on top of one or two apps that they need to run for, 100, 200 people. It does not justify that level of, you know what I mean? So it's always, there's no black and white. There's always a gray area.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Right. Yeah, man, like I guess we are having very interesting conversation. Like, Sana, do you have any questions? Because I guess we are almost 50 minutes into it. And this is a topic.
50 minutes? We're having fun.
Yeah. Like, I guess like this is a topic where there's no shortage of questions, right? One after another. Like, it's a very interesting topic to discuss, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Like, I guess like, so if you have any questions, so let's go through them and. Then we could figure out a way to wrap this up.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking on the particular conversation we're having on the AI in corporations. So I was just thinking, because of the speed that AI enables, I understand it can be used negatively, but I wonder if this is just going to accelerate the weeding out of those bad organizational practices, and if potentially because we were just thinking it's so much easier now for anyone with the right prompts to be able to build. It's just going to become like weeks are getting compressed into literally minutes. So I wonder how that's going to work.
It's a great topic. I mean, I can think of, like, there was one company, again, Toronto-based startup. A friend of mine used to be their COO, and I forget the name. I need AI to remind me things. No, I need RAM. But I think what they did was analyzing emails and texts in an organization to identify. It wasn't generative; it was more on the classifying side of NLP, and then classifying sentiment and sort of, can you, like, if you can imagine very quickly based on the written body of work, and now everything's written because if a lot of stuff is happening on Teams, you can imagine that it's transcribed anyway. So if you could let AI run wild on identifying people who need coaching on decision making, coaching on empathy towards their, in meetings towards their colleagues. So yeah, I think it could be actually really powerful. Sometimes it could sound pretty scary too, that you're being analyzed and judged constantly. But if it's not abused, it could be pretty powerful.
Yeah,
I think.
To your point, I mean, you said it can be, you can abuse it in the sense that you're making things more complicated than they are. There's a paradox of choice, but you're eventually going to fail if that's the way that people go. Right. So then, if you do things, I guess if the bar is that much faster, then the people who fail just fail faster, and then they're out. It's just much faster iteration.
Yeah, I guess I guess that might be a very interesting thing that we could all look out for, right? Because let's say there are 10 different corporates today. Maybe due to the existing processes or whatnot, things are slow, right? But let's say maybe even one corporate gets it right, it will start racing ahead, right? So then there is this market forces which will force others to be more efficient, right? If you look at all the recent layoffs happening in all the big tech, right? It's Twitter started doing it, then Google, of course, it's all also partly related to the stock value and the markets going down and a bunch of stuff, but still people are also realizing that, okay, we don't need so many people to do this, right? And all you need is just one domino to fall, right? One domino and everyone could just fall up with it, right? So that would be a very interesting thing to observe. And I believe one more interesting thing over here would be wonder how the SaaS companies would be doing. For example, let's say with AI, right? I'm talking about, let's say, when AI could generate code as well. Let's say with GitHub Copilot or whatnot, you could build code. Now, imagine a situation, let's say, where a company needs a product. You don't need to buy it from SaaS providers. You could build it on your own. Now in this situation, how a company is going to be efficient? Because earlier, let's say you are dependent on Stripe to give all your solutions. You're dependent on some, Datadog to provide all your solutions. So whatever, rules they're defined, you are bouncing within the boundaries. But now all of a sudden, you could build more efficient system. You get to go ahead. Others will be like, oh, sorry, we need to catch up. Sorry, this whole department, you're very slow. I don't want you to waste time. Move faster. Boom, boom, boom. It will be interesting thing to watch out.
Yeah. And again, it's a different level, but it's no different than, let's say, Google Sheets, right? Mm-hmm. Because I was just using this example earlier today, talking to a partner of ours. We are in the business with Integral. We, a lot of times, a lot of businesses run a portion of their workflow, an organization, one of their departments via one or two or three or four Excel sheets. Literally, we've all seen it, So we built systems around this. And it's for a small organization, the Excel sheet actually made sense. And the analogy, the example I was using earlier with our partner was, at Integral, our timesheets and our invoicing is Google Sheets based. So I sound like a hypocrite here. If I go to a sales meeting and pitch people on, hey, we help you modernize and organize your workflows via what we do via the use of software, but I don't use. But you know what I mean? But my use case with the small firm and the tight-knit team that we have and the number of projects we take on, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to go. But the minute, like for example, at PwC or Deloitte, even their Toronto or their Canada operation, imagine I don't know, tens of partners, salespeople, tons of hundreds and hundreds of consultants, different rates, all that stuff. You can't possibly use Google Sheets for that. Maybe they do. They have another problem. But you know what I mean? So I think for some use cases, it totally makes sense to throw ChatGPT or some sort of other sort of an AI generated app. Maybe this is an idea for my friends at Superblocks. Superblocks is a low code internal tool building platform. So it has UI connections to different databases and systems, and you can build an app based out of that. So, can you imagine, like, you layer a UIZard or a ChatGPT on top of this and say, go build me a CRM or whatever. So it's doable, but it has a limit. I don't think you can just, I don't think for maybe a tiny low value type of a use case, you could replace it. But for like some stuff that some of the SaaS companies do and the UI that they use, it's unparalleled. Another example, Pipedrive is just such a phenomenal CRM. Now I'm a sales agent for Pipedrive. I should ask for a commission on it. But add commission code in the referral code. No, but in our experience, there have been multiple times in which we are in the business of building software, so we make money by building custom software. But I've never taken on and I've never done a custom CRM work, because why would you do that?
Makes
right?
sense,
Like Pipedrive makes it so for certain use cases. Obviously, there's different ones, but I don't know, I'm digressing a bit, but I just want to provide a bit of context that yes, it is possible to get an auto-generated application, and maybe there's probably already startups that let you go from concept to click a button to deploy. Right? I don't know, maybe. If not, you should build it. But it has a limit to what kind of complex data model or business process you can automate via that.
Interesting. Okay.
I think it's a great time to be in software, a great time to be in SaaS, great time to be in AI,
as well.
Application development. Just sorry, one last thing, unless we have more things to talk about. But I love application. I love application of code, software, hardware too, but software is my gig. So ChatGPT was super exciting for me, because for the first time in a while, it got me to a place where I'm like, okay, now I can actually be involved in AI, because I love application infrastructure, really heavy PhD tech. I started my career in that at Altera in semiconductors, and I love, those guys are brainiacs, but there was a reason that I quickly came out. Like I'm a applications guy. So that's why I love ChatGPT. All of a sudden it's allowing us application folks to start playing around with AI.
That's a very good point.
And all this is making me realize that we talk so much about ChatGPT, and there's so much power that they hold. So many companies are running off of them. I guess in your opinion, like as an engineer, as running a software firm, what should companies do that leverage it right now to make themselves less vulnerable to some large organization holding out the keys to their companies, essentially?
Great question. The obvious answer that comes to my mind that we've talked about is, how can we have a multi-tenant, or like have a tenant? Like, how can you have your own mini AI infrastructure within your corporate firewall or walled garden, whatever you want to call it? But yeah, great question. I don't know that obvious answer is not so obvious, because it takes a lot of computation to deploy that. So yeah, great question. I don't know. I mean, in one sense, I think Amazon, AWS, does have lots of capabilities that could be leveraged by different organizations. I think Azure does too. I don't know. OpenAI may get in that business. Apple, I think, does Apple allow white label
Like
app stores?
I don't think I don't think so. Like I guess you could still have something within an enterprise app store where you could sell within your enterprise
Oh, yeah,
apps.
you do have an enterprise
Yes.
app store. You're right. You're
Yeah,
right. So
yeah,
maybe OpenAI will do
I mean,
something like that.
I think like I guess because of the deal between Microsoft and OpenAI, Microsoft Azure is offering OpenAI APIs through their store, right, or through their service. So I guess they are both hand in hand, right? So what would be interesting to watch out is like how AWS and Google are gonna compete against that. I mean, I guess again going back to the points that you were making earlier, I think eventually we will see a situation where we don't have to worry about what AI is under the skin, right? Just like today, we need not worry about what is cloud under the skin. I don't have to set up servers, install the latest version of Ubuntu, and do all those things and deploy all that stuff, right? EC2, boom, 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 or create a bunch of DevOps scripts and it goes out and deploy.
Right.
So something like that, I mean, of course, we would be dependent on all these three big techs to offer, and we have to trust them like God. But they would be making all this AI tools available, and we get to use it.
Yeah, so it's a really great analogy, and we saw this with public cloud too, because we are still seeing it. 4 months ago, no, August, about 6 months ago, I had a discussion with a prospective client around how do we ensure that our data is not mixed with other clients' data, right? And that's the big thing in the public cloud space. And so there are architectures, there are ways from a tech and design perspective to design around it, and then there's going to be some time for people to just get used to it. With not mixing data was cleaner. With not mixing AIs, I don't know, right? Because it's too early. I don't know if maybe people will start inventing use cases that that big orgs may not care about anymore as much. So if it can be guaranteed that, I'm making this up, but my confidential proprietary data does not. It's passed through. It goes through the AI, and results come back, and it's all not persisted. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about the data getting stored on their machines. I'm talking about even it won't impact the AI. So if you can guarantee that it's always a pass through with no impact, maybe it'll make organizations easier to this. Because one thing is, where's my data? The other thing is my data given away? By virtue of my data going through your AI, will your AI become smarter and then help my competitors? So again, early on, I don't know, but maybe a tech company, can figure out ways of, and there are lots of AIs that AI companies working on explainability of the models, traceability of decisions. We have an investment in Giscard out of Paris that does testing of models. Like, how can you bring systematic testing of AI? So it's in the works. I'm not as close to it, but I can imagine that we just need to get people familiar and comfortable with the fact that your data going through AI, just like public cloud, won't take away from your competitive advantage. Of course, there are risks.
Yeah. So, I guess one of the, I mean, I'm not sure how correct this is, but one of the interesting things I read was especially let's say if you look at tools like say GitHub Copilot, which could write code for you. Now it trained itself on all the code bases which was sitting on GitHub. Now, of course, you could say that maybe GitHub has some rights, maybe in their terms and condition, they could say we could use it to improve our services and whatnot. Right. But then do they have the rights to kind of learn from my code and help my competitor to write better code automatically, right? Yeah. And again, this is a challenge for a lot of this open source libraries. I mean, people have been doing it, people have been contributing to it. All this open source libraries have been sitting on GitHub, and now GitHub is using that to build something, and someone might build a closed source code with using that. how are you going to where are you going to trace it?
Yeah.
And another challenge here is, let's say if it was just content, right? Let's say if I'm doing some Google and someone is referencing some stuff, you're still able to point out, oh, this belongs to this repository. But when it comes to AI models, it's not just like one library.
Yeah.
It might be learning something from hundreds of different repositories.
Right.
And again, each of those repositories might have different score, right? So this repository score of say 10, this is 8, this is 9. So how is, let's say, the 99th percentile repository gonna say that, your software is better and this 0.1% contribution is because of me, now I should get paid for that?
Yeah.
It's a very different topics, I guess, which people are still figuring out. Anyways, this has been a very interesting conversation. I think this is a topic, I guess, which will never end. We keep discovering more and more interesting topics here. But having said that, this is not the last conversation. This is just one of the many we are looking to do over here. And Sandy, I will look forward to having you some next time. Maybe we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
And as we close, any closing thoughts?
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me on. Pleasure. Would love to be back and continue this conversation. And who knows, by the next time I come back, what is GPT-4 is going to be trained on 1.2 trillion parameters. So
like that.
I may send my, double into the podcast. So that,
some years like a 3
as
years.
Sunaina mentioned, my, brain download.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a pleasure talking to both of
awesome.
you, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Right.
And your own podcast as well. I mean, if listeners want to follow you.
Oh, yeah, sure. We do a podcast called OpsTalk, opstok.com. We talk about manufacturing and logistics and fun stuff like that. But maybe we'll have you guys over on that to talk about AI in the context of logistics.
100%. So we'll put the links below the description. We'll have all the coordinates where you could reach out to Sahand. Sahand is building integral software. So if you need any help building software or any tech consulting, give Sahand a call. So with that, we'll wrap up today's conversation. Thank you once again, Sahand and Sunaina. And
thanks, guys.
Yeah, so next time.